Hare Krishna, Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prasthaya, Yavisesa Sanyavadi Prasthaya Sataya. So, we are reading about unsteady devotion and how to deal with unsteady devotion. And again, we're outside, and so we have this weird lighting. This looks like a movie. And I can't talk so loud because people are sleeping. Do our best. Vijnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesatarine Sri Chaitanya Manovishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Shayam Rupakadamayam Dalitisha Padantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangulangayate Girim Yakripatamaham Vande Siguru Dinatarinam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shudvaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're going to continue reading from where we left off yesterday. And we were reading about unsteady devotion. And we were reading from Shivaram Swami's book called Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani. The first step is to desire a solution. Once devotees realize that they need to improve, they should chant daily and for prolonged periods in the company of advanced devotees who have spontaneous attraction for the holy name. They should study the behavior of offenseless chanters, emulate their mood, and inquire from them how to overcome inattentiveness. The example and guidance of advanced devotees will certainly inspire neophytes to cast off the shackles of apathy, laziness, and distraction. So, one of the ideas is that, I'm going to go to chat. One of the ideas is sometimes when you have difficulties, and it seems that you may not be able to overcome them, or not overcome them well, and not overcome them quickly. One of the remedies is to get the association of devotees who don't have those problems. And it's not always even a question of hearing from them sometimes. It's just a question of being with them. And in that association, those desires become purified. So here, Maharaj quotes Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He doesn't say it, but he's quoting him by saying that this apathy and inattentiveness and distraction can often be cured by being with advanced devotees. Devotees who don't have that problem, and especially chanting with them. And the first point he said is you have to be aware of the solution. And Yesterday we were briefly discussing a point which I want to discuss at more length now, which is very interesting, very important, and something that I've spoken about often and is very much misunderstood by many devotees. And that is the idea that our philosophy is that if you chant Hare Krishna, if you become Krishna conscious, it will solve all problems. But there's no explanation how that works. So it seems to say that by chanting we become purified. When we become purified, we have no problems. So I was discussing this yesterday when I was driving down from my sister's house to Laguna Beach, and Jayagopal and Anuradha were here, and I was explaining explaining the class that I gave yesterday, what we were talking about. And we were talking about how with the power of bhakti, when you chant, you become Krishna conscious, and you get the power of bhakti, and the power of bhakti helps you become pure. So it's both the bhakti helping you do what you have to do to cleanse yourself, to purify yourself, because there's so many processes and so many things to do, as well as the mercy of the holy name doing it. So it's not as automatic as many of us would like to think or believe, that I just chant Hare Krishna, I don't have to do anything else, it will do everything. And so I had stopped off to see Giriraj Swami, and somehow or other we discussed this point. I don't know how it came up. And I said, what is your understanding? And he said, well, Rabindranath Prabhu had said something, which I'd like to share with you, which I really like, which I think is a perfect explanation, or it clarifies what I was saying in a better way. So I said, people think if you chant Hare Krishna, it solves all your problems. You don't have to do anything else. He said, Rabindranath said it is actually the exact opposite. So I said, what does that mean? He said, by chanting Hare Krishna, you get the ability, the insight, and the power to deal with your problems. By the purity of chanting, it reduces enough of your false ego that you can start to see your problems, reduces enough of your false ego that you are willing to deal with your problems, gives you the energy, the enthusiasm, or the determination to deal with your problems. So that, I love that. I think that's a perfect explanation. So we're chanting Hare Krishna. What is it doing? It's empowering us to face all the things we need to face and giving us the strength and intelligence to overcome those obstacles. So his point is, if you say chanting Hare Krishna solves all the problems, of course it does purify us, it does uplift us. But when you read between the lines, or the explanation is, it solves problems by giving you the power to solve the problem. It solves problems by giving you the insight to solve the problems. And here, Maharaj is saying, you have to desire a solution. And previous to that, it was talking about what the anarthas are. So obviously, we have to become aware that we have them. Sometimes we don't think we have them. We think we're immune for some reason, but we're not accurate about our own faults, either not seeing them or not seeing them to the degree that they actually exist. So chanting purifies you enough that you can see them, and you can see the severity of them. And also you can gain the desire to deal with them, which I thought was a really concise and precise way of explaining this. So if anyone says, I'm just chanting Hare Krishna, if I chant Hare Krishna, all my problems will go away. You can say, well, Rabindranath said it's the opposite. That by chanting Hare Krishna, you'll have the power and insight to deal with your problems. You could You could say in a sense, if you chant Nam Aparad, it will increase your problems. So that's there also. So it's not. In other words, it's not that everything's guaranteed because you have to do it in the right way. And it's not that you just chant, but you have to avoid offenses. And most of those offenses require proper behavior in your dealings when you're not chanting, and your thinking when you're not chanting. And of course, chanting doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within the context of sadhu sangha and the other aspects of bhakti, your sadhana, your service, and so forth. So everything is qualified. And as we discussed, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, if you chant committing aparad, then you could actually increase your weeds. So yes, you say chanting, you could say, well, if I chant pure Shuddhanam, will that solve all problems? It will take a lot of work to get to Shuddhanam, and so you'll have to perform the other processes. But when you get to Shuddhanam, then you'll naturally want to perform the other processes, not out of duty, but out of natural attraction. So generally, it's never going to exist in a vacuum. Well, I can chant Hare Krishna, and I don't have to behave properly. That'll never be there, even on the stage of Shuddha. And then it's also a question of what problems you think it's going to solve. Because, for example, to chant the holy name to solve material problems is an offense to the holy name. So I'm having health issues, or I'm having financial issues, or I'm having marital issues. So if I chant Hare Krishna, they should all go away. But that's not, nowhere in any Shastra does it explicitly say that chanting Hare Krishna will solve those kinds of material problems. What it does say is if you're chanting Hare Krishna to solve those kinds of problems, that's an offense. So we have to clarify what we mean by solve all problems. Certainly it'll solve the problem of material entanglement. But again, it's empowering us to pull those weeds out. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a purport, or perhaps several, with this analogy that anarthas are like weeds. And Prabhupada lists many anarthas, and he said we should pull them out. So I think that just underscores this point, because we have to pull them out means we have to do work. And if chanting Hare Krishna is the only thing we have to do, it will pull them all out naturally, then why would Prabhupada say pull them out? We have to pull them out. And also, why would Prabhupada ask us to follow any principles? Because if chanting Hare Krishna does everything, then by chanting, you naturally would follow the principles. Right? Is that true? Yes, it is. So, okay. Govinda, Govinda. Okay, so we'll keep reading. Neophyte devotees should also beg for the mercy of the holy name and the owner of the holy name, Lord Krishna. Chanting regularly before Tulsi, serious neophytes empowered by great devotees and by the Lord himself will certainly come to the stage of offenseless chanting. In this way, by saintly association, freedom from distractions, and determined, confident enthusiasm, the neophyte devotional practices become steady. Steadiness is called nistha. Steadiness comes after anartha nivritti. In addition to avoiding or correcting offenses to the holy name, devotees must carefully discharge their prescribed duties. Krishna consciousness is systematic. When properly carried out, it produces the desired result. Failure to follow the prescribed rules and regulations not only spoils one's advancement in devotion, but it creates further obstacles. So it's kind of like, imagine you're walking in a jungle, and you've been trained You'll be given tools. These tools, you can cut the bushes so you can create a path to walk. And you have to be careful of these animals, and if you see them, this is what you should do. So material life is a little bit like a jungle, and we're walking through material life, and there's so many dangerous animals that could attack us. And so we're learning in Krishna consciousness how to deal with these dangers and traverse the path so we can go back to Godhead. And so just as in a jungle, if we don't follow the process we've been given, we may fail, we may be killed, we may be injured. It's the same with bhakti. So sometimes devotees take to bhakti and kind of compromise the process, thinking that they'll be successful, and they realize that their conditioning is a lot stronger than they thought. And I was talking yesterday after class about a phenomena that I think might be somewhat deviating, at least in our consciousness, would deviate us. If we think that, well, I always wanted Krishna consciousness, and when I first came in touch with it, it just resonated with me, and I became a devotee, so I'm a spiritual person. So that's good. That those samskars brought you to Krishna consciousness. Your study of Prabhupada's books brought you. But once you're brought, that alone is not enough to make you Krishna conscious. You have to actually do the process. So I think where a lot of devotees get caught up in is they feel that they have this spiritual inclination. So that, they're not inclined for sinful activities. They're not inclined towards gross material activities. But if they don't take to the process well, that inclination is not enough to awaken love of Krishna. It has to be done through the process. So I may be a very spiritual person, but I'm also a very conditioned person. So that strong desire, or the desire that needs to be strong enough to get out of the material world, is cultivated specifically through proper chanting and proper association and hearing, regular hearing. And if we don't do that properly, then like the person in the jungle who doesn't do what they were trained to do, they may run into danger. So when you become a devotee and you're trying to become purified, you're going to be very much confronting your own conditioning, because that has to be overcome in order to be Krishna conscious. So just the desire, or just the feeling that I always wanted to be a devotee, and the attraction for that is not sufficient to get us out of the material world. What to speak of give us love of Krishna? That all is going to come through the regulated sadhana. So the mistake that some devotees make is they don't really focus enough on their sadhana, and they put a lot of stock in the fact that they have strong spiritual inclinations that they've brought over from the past lives. But Prabhupada always said, Maya is very strong. So those inclinations are not. They're good. It's nice. But it would be like having an inclination for anything. You don't have an inclination for music, but if I don't practice an instrument, I'm not going to become expert. I may be able to sing without lessons. I may be able to play some instruments fairly well without taking lessons. But even if I don't take lessons, I still need to practice. I still need to cultivate those abilities. For any great musician, even if they never studied music, they certainly practiced. So the same way, we may have natural inclinations for spiritual life, but they have to be cultivated through practice, specifically through chanting. And so don't think that just because you've always had spiritual inclinations, you're going to do well in Krishna consciousness. It's really bringing you to Krishna consciousness. It's keeping you inclined, but inclined to what? Inclined to practice. And if you don't do the practice, the inclination is not going to be sufficient to arouse your dormant love of Krishna, because it's the process that arouses it, not just the natural inclination. And we're all on different levels, so we come to Krishna consciousness on different levels. But if you come on a lower level and you practice well, you're going to quickly achieve a higher level. If you come on a higher level and you don't practice well, you're not going to go very far, and it's possible you may go down. So it's good that we have spiritual inclination, but it's just it it gives us you could say in a sense it makes it easier to practice because we may not be so attracted to material things, but if the practice isn't done well, then we're not going to succeed just because we have an inclination for spiritual life. So I think that's a mistake some devotees make. They think that even with slack practice, because they have spiritual inclination, that's sufficient. Usually what I see is that when that's the case, devotees, they don't, if their inclination for spiritual life is strong, they usually don't go down, but they usually don't go up that much either, because they're not practicing. They kind of remain, as I believe as Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, it's kind of like a man in the ocean who's not reaching shore, but he's keeping his head above water. So he's not drowning either, but he's not reaching the destination. So we don't want to be in the ocean of birth and death with our head above water and not reaching the shore. And you might say, I'm inclined to keep my head above water. Well, that's good. But now that your head's above water, swim to the shore. So the swimming would be like the practice. That will get you to the shore of love for Krishna. So always understand it's the practice that's going to get you to the shore. The practice awakens the dormant love of Krishna. It's not just an inclination for spiritual life, or it's not just a sentiment for spiritual life that's going to awaken our dormant love of Krishna. It's actually the practice. And as we were saying yesterday, the practice of chanting is the most important practice. And so in this age, we can't commit nam aparad and at the same time continually advance in Krishna consciousness. We have to at least be chanting on the level of nam abhas, making every effort not to commit nam aparad. And that kind of chanting will prove to be extremely powerful in advancing in Krishna consciousness. And all the other activities are supportive. Sadhu Sangha, hearing, service, that will support our chanting. Chanting doesn't live in a vacuum. It's within that context of other practices. So as our chanting is supported, and as our chanting not increases but improves, you'll see your whole spiritual life will improve. So really, we always have to understand it's not just because I want to be Krishna conscious. It's not that because I'm attracted to spiritual life that I'll advance, but I actually have to do the practices. So do you like Bhagavad Gita? Yes, I like it very much. Do you read it? Not much. So liking it is good, but not reading it is not good. Do you like to chant? Yes, I do. Do you chant much? Not much. Liking chanting is good, but not chanting is not. It's not going to help. Do you like to eat healthy? Yes, I like to eat healthy. Do you eat healthy? Not so much. So liking is good because by liking you have the chance that you will eat healthy. But if you don't eat healthy, you're worse off than the person who doesn't like to eat healthy but does. So maybe I don't have as strong an inclination for spiritual life as you do, but my practice is better. And because my practice is better, I do better than you do. Right? I at least force myself. And you might have an actual attraction, but you don't force yourself enough. You don't regulate yourself enough. So you won't do as well as someone who doesn't have a natural attraction, but will regulate themselves enough. Okay. This is called giving class at sunrise outside under a little yellow light. Has a dramatic effect, but as long as you can hear me, that's what's most important. And then by the time class ends, the sun will rise. So we'll have a sunrise. You'll get to see the sunrise while I'm speaking. I don't know where you are. If you're on the west coast, you'll see the sunrise also. But no, the sun has already risen. No. If you're not in America, or if you're not on the west coast of America, your sun has already risen. Okay, we'll continue reading. While instructing Rupa Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu warned of the bad habits that arise from improperly performed devotional service. For instance, even sincere devotees tend to delight in veneration and fame. trappings that come with being recognized as a devotee. These weeds grow besides the creeper of devotion. If not curtailed, their influence can overwhelm beginners and distract them from the path of pure devotion. The Lord himself names a few of many possible unwanted habits. So here, these are actually the weeds I was referring to. Nishidha chara kuntinati jiva hinshana labha puja pratishta yata upashaka kam. The light is really bad. I don't know if I read that correctly. Some unnecessary creepers growing with the bhakti creeper are the creepers of behavior unacceptable for those trying to attain perfection. Oh, excuse me. Some unnecessary creepers growing with the bhakti creeper are the creepers of behavior unacceptable for those trying to attain perfection. Diplomatic behavior, animal killing, mundane profiteering, mundane adoration, and mundane importance. All these are unwanted creepers, so let's discuss. These are some. These are certainly not all. But the point is that the point that's being made here is that even while you're cultivating bhakti, unwanted desires, which are not part of bhakti, may enter. So what that means is that they're actually there as conditioned souls. They're there potentially. That we have these things. They have these desires. And so if we're not careful, we may, through the process of bhakti, be sort of agitating these desires. And so these are desires that can pop up because conditioned soul has these tendencies. So let's discuss them. So the first one, behavior unacceptable for those trying to attain perfection. So of course that could be many, many things. That could be starting with sinful activities. So we have four regulative principles, but you could expand that to other sinful activities. And so sometimes, it might be something simple, like frivolous activities that just kind of waste time and are just not indicative of behavior of a Vaishnava. If you were spending hours a day on video games, innocent activities, so to speak, not sinful, but just you're wasting valuable time. And you might say, well, it's an innocent activity, but it's indicative of a wrong mentality. So the activity itself may not be, it's not so bad. It's not like I'm committing any sin or I'm harming anyone. But the fact that you're doing it in the first place and not reading Bhagavatam or chanting is indicative of a problem in and of itself. So any kind of frivolity that wastes too much of your time. There are frivolities that are done for reasons, usually sports that might be done just for health reasons or to sharpen your mind, martial arts or something. So you find it helpful physically or mentally. That's different. You may have very strong tendencies to control people. It's not really indicative of the behavior of devotees. Very unkind, harsh. You could think of many activities. If you think of activities which are not typical characteristics of devotees and that you're engaged in, then just become aware that this is, by Vaishnava standards, it's considered a weed. I have this attraction. What do you do? Some devotees will tell me, they'll have a particular hobby, which is there's really nothing to do with anything. They can't use it in Krishna service and kind of waste their time. So something like that, or behavior which is not indicative of or characteristic of the way Vaishnavas behave. Something that you do that may, the way you deal with people that may be so un-Vaishnava-like that you have to deal with it. And, you all know how a Vaishnava should act, so then you would know when you're not acting like a Vaishnava, or at least try to become aware when you're not acting, doing things which are not Vaishnava. Let's read further. Prabhupada doesn't give exact descriptions, so we're just kind of unpacking it. Number 2, diplomatic behavior. Diplomatic behavior, you can look at it in 2 ways. Just Rupa Goswami says the devotee should be straightforward in their dealings with this world and things of this world. They should not be cheaters and liars. Brahmas are truthful, so the problem is if we're too diplomatic, then we tend to take on that character in all our dealings. Sometimes in spreading Krishna consciousness in legal dealings, to secure properties or other legal areas, that naturally you have to be, we'll use the word savvy. So, but on a regular basis in your personal dealings, if you're dishonest or diplomatic, that is unhealthy for your bhakti. Another example of diplomacy, as the Prabhupada explains elsewhere, is that you pretend to be advanced, and in your private life, you're committing sinful activity, or you're doing things that devotees don't do. But you show the world that you're very advanced. That's also an aspect of diplomacy. And that, of course, that's your pride overtaking you. And so that doesn't help your bhakti. The next one, animal killing, which is obvious. Mundane profiteering. What does Prabhupada mean by mundane profiteering? I think anything that we're doing to advance ourselves materially, which is not connected to Krishna consciousness, is a deviation for 2 reasons. Number 1, obviously it takes time away from what we could be doing for Krishna. And it focuses us on achieving material goals for our personal sense gratification. So if you have a business and you make a profit, is that mundane profiteering? No. But if you're trying to accumulate materially far beyond what you require to live simply, and sometimes by your karma it just comes, wealth will come. But if your focus is on achieving sense gratification through your work, achieving any material advantages that go far beyond your necessities, then you're engaged in trying to advance yourself materially, which ultimately means trying to advance yourself in sense gratification. And obviously that's going to be an impediment for devotional service if you're putting all this energy to advance your sense gratification. We may put energy to advance our material situation because we need security. So I need a home, I need a car, I need to take care of my children, I need to take care of my parents, so I'll need money, I'll need facility. So that's different. And I need facility to serve Krishna, I need money to put on festivals, to print books and so on. But that's not mundane, that's transcendental. And so, as Prabhupada means is when we get focused on improving our material life to increase our sense gratification, then we're in trouble. Okay, the next one is mundane adoration and mundane importance. They're similar. I want to be glorified or honored by people in general, or I want to be adored by them. And what Prabhupada means is not that sometimes it happens, like sometimes just due to the way, to who you are, or due to situations, you might be in a position where people honor you. Just like we have one devotee in England, and he's part of a band, and that band was very famous during the 70s, like super, super famous. And they got together again, and they still tour. And so obviously people still adore them, they're old fans, and maybe some new fans. So they're playing, they're on stage, and they're being honored and glorified. Now, probably when they were young kids, that was a strong motivation to be honored, to be adored. But as older guys, they're used to it. And probably now they're playing just so they can pay bills. That's probably the main reason, and they like to play, of course. But this devotee who is on the band, obviously he's not doing it so he can be adored and honored. If he were, then that would be a big anartha. So sometimes honor comes to you. So that's not what Prabhupada's saying. Honor may come to you, but you deal with it honestly and humbly. But what Prabhupada is saying, if you're actually making an effort to put yourself in a position to be adored, to be honored and adored by people, that's a huge weed, one of the biggest actually. So honor and criticism, excuse me, honor and criticism, they come. It's the nature of the world. I don't think any of us have not been criticized, and some of us on a regular basis, for doing things that aren't really wrong. It's just the way the world is. And in the same way, all of us have been honored. And so those will go. Those will continue. But as devotees, we don't try to position ourselves or make an effort to be honored or to be adored. We're trying to become humble. So obviously, if you're trying to become humble, or we should try to become humble. And so to position yourself to become honored is a huge weed in bhakti. Then Prabhupada, the translation ends, all these are unwanted creepers. That's a quote. It's from the Madhya Lila, chapter 19, verse 159. To eradicate these weeds, devotees must listen to well-wishers who can pinpoint specific unwanted habits and distinguish them from the real creeper of devotion. Prabhupada says sometimes what's most interesting is that sometimes these creepers, to some devotees, look like creepers of devotion. So like this desire, or when you get honor, you get inspired, and now you're all enthusiastic to go out and distribute more books because you're being honored, when actually the honor becomes the real motivating factor. And you don't realize it because it's motivating you to distribute books, so you think the motivation is pure. So that's Prabhupada's point in saying that this is sometimes it looks like the creeper, and it's the weed. It's unfortunate if we think the creeper is the weed, isn't it? Neophytes must then take the necessary steps to cut down unwanted creepers and curtail any whimsical behavior that may arise from the neglect of essential spiritual practices. Early rising, attending the morning program, and maintaining strict Vaishnava conduct, such as avoiding mundane movies and food cooked by non-devotees, exemplify these essential practices. So the point is, when you become a devotee, you have to insulate yourself by surrounding yourself with good association and the proper practices. And this idea of eating food cooked by non-devotees, I know for some devotees, maybe they think that's an overrated problem because a lot of the food is cooked by machines and so on and so forth. But as a general principle, we try to avoid, and especially we try to avoid restaurants. And our understanding is that, we may not understand how this happens, but the consciousness with which food is prepared is then placed into the food. So that means if I associate with you, I'm associating with your consciousness, right? I, I pick up on your vibration and I'm affected by it. And we all know that. If we're with certain people, then we feel very good, or we're with other people who feel very bad. We don't want to hang out with them. So a lot of times you'll say, I don't like the vibes of this person. I don't like this person's vibrations. Sometimes you just don't want to be around certain people. You don't like the way you feel around them. And other times you really like the way you feel around people. Those usually become your friends. There's a natural attraction. We're so similar, or we just like being around one another. So the point is that that's what happens when you eat their food. They're, you're getting their association through their cooking. So that person who cooked this, I'm associating with them by eating their food as if I was with them, as if I was spending time with them. That's something to consider because we know that association with non-devotees can be very detrimental, specifically if a person is very materialistic, very sinful, or a person is a Mayavadi, or even a spiritualist who's very confused and mixed up, who might confuse and mix you up by his association. We know that that can be destructive to our bhakti, can arouse very strong material sentiments. So Mahaprabhu said that we have to avoid, at all costs, avoid that kind of association. One of the most important principles of bhakti. So by eating the food they cook, we actually have their association. So we should be a little careful about it as far as possible. We should cook ourselves, offer it to our deities, offer it to a picture, whatever we have. And there is a difference, for sure. At least better eat food cooked by machines. I mean, sometimes circumstantially it happens that we have to eat food cooked by non-devotees, but we try to avoid it in general. Um, Early rising, attending the morning program, maintaining strict Vaishnava conduct, such as avoiding mundane movies and food cooked by non-devotees. So it's like, you have this example of a plant. It's just sprouting, and a lot of times in India you'll see it's fenced in so other animals don't eat it. And it requires a lot of attention, sun, water, fertilizer. So that's the context or the environment. So if you use this analogy for bhakti, then your creeper of devotion is required to grow within a certain environment, and that environment, water is hearing and chanting, and it has to be fenced in so otherwise these anarthas will eat it like animals. It has to have proper sunlight, it has to be a proper temperature. And so these constitute the activities of devotional service, the behavior which is conducive. So the idea is that don't just think I can chant and have behavior which is not conducive. It won't work. It'll undermine the potency of your chanting. That's the point. The holy name is fully powerful, but it depends on the context. And the context is your lifestyle, your thinking, your behavior. In unsteady devotional service, anishtita bhajana kriya, Devotees oscillate between doing things correctly and incorrectly. As already mentioned, the results of incorrect practices, offenses, and negligence are inauspicious. But when devotees practice properly, their service clears away the unwanted habits that have arisen from previous acts, pious or impious, as well as those that have arisen from mistakes made while performing devotional practices. The creeper of devotion can thus flourish. So what's being said is that we do many things wrong, and sometimes we may commit an offense or a sin, and that tarnishes our heart, stains the heart, and then makes it more difficult to be Krishna conscious. But by situating ourselves properly in devotional service and properly chanting, cleanses away the effects of those past mistakes. So, there is dirt that sometimes falls upon us, but we can wash it away. But if we don't wash it away, then we're going to have trouble. And then in that state, we'll find Krishna consciousness to be difficult when it really shouldn't be difficult. And if it is, it's because we're making it difficult for ourselves. But newborn, unwanted habits, habits that arise from offenses committed while still on the stage of unsteady devotion, are not so easily removed. Though their effects are easily incurred and quickly stockpiled, their eradication one by one requires diligent effort over time. Yes. So the point he's making is that there are offenses to the holy name, there are offenses to Vaishnavas, there are offenses in the worship of the deity, and there are offenses to the holy name, the holy Dham. And these offenses are, you could say, tarnishing or inhibiting the creeper of bhakti, tarnishing our heart. And then when we make them, we need to overcome them, and some offenses take longer to overcome than others. And some offenses we won't be completely eradicated until we achieve higher levels of devotional service. So he's making an important point. It's easy to stockpile offenses, but it's not easy to rid yourself of them. It requires diligent effort over time. In short, although bhakti surely frees devotees from reactions to past deeds, carelessness, carelessness, carelessness in the discharge of devotional service may cause more anarthas to build up than unsteady devotional service clears away. That's a very good point. I'll read that again. In short, although bhakti surely frees devotees from reactions to past deeds, carelessness in the discharge of devotional service may cause more anarthas to build up than unsteady service clears away. So you're having competition, and more anarthas are coming than you're clearing. You don't want that to happen. As a result, new unwanted habits may discourage devotees and choke their devotional creepers. Thus weakened, many devotees have turned their back on cultivating pure devotion and returned to material life. So you don't, in the analogy, you have the creeper of bhakti and you have the weeds, and the weeds, when they surround the creeper, can choke it. And Prabhupada, I think that's a reality in the botanical world, and Prabhupada has said it's a reality in the world of spiritual practice. So all these unwanted desires and anarthas are like weeds which have to be picked, and if we're not careful, they choke the creeper. So then we're making it difficult on ourselves to grow our creeper. That's the point. Unfortunately, ISKCON's history in this regard is replete with examples. Even senior leaders, GBC secretaries, sannyasis, and gurus, have succumbed to the effects of offenses and carelessness. In the name of serving the preaching mission, leaders have nationalized their own misdeeds. Excuse me, not nationalized. Leaders have rationalized their own misdeeds. In some cases, nationalized, if they're big enough. They have rationalized their own misdeeds even as they trample on the feelings of other Vaishnavas in the name of spiritual authority. The downfall of these devotees proves the defectiveness of such methods. So you never, the, the, the point is, if not just leaders, but anyone, if we rationalize a mistake, it doesn't help. It might help our false ego feel better, but it doesn't help our bhakti creeper. That's the point. So you, there, if you rationalize, then you're not solving the problem. So if you want to prove that you've done something wrong, if you want to prove that what you've done is not wrong when it is, what's the point? Because how can you correct yourself unless you recognize that you're wrong? So then you trample around doing something wrong, and that eventually becomes the cause of your fall down. So we don't want to rationalize. It's not good. We want to recognize and deal with it. And the point Maharaj is making is that sometimes it's very difficult when you're in a higher position because of your prestige and because of your honor. So you want to say the bad things you're doing are not bad to maintain your position. So that's where the humility of a Vaishnava comes to save you. That even though you're in a big position, if you make a mistake and you're willing to admit it, then by admitting it, you correct it. And also, I think by admitting it, you're setting an example. That sometimes even a leader may make a mistake, but he's humble enough to recognize it and correct it. So better remain in a humble position, even lose your honor to some degree and admit your mistakes. But actually what you'll find is when you admit your mistakes, even if they're bad, people respect you. So when you try to hide it, they lose respect for you. I've seen this. Even if you admit you're a more advanced devotee, but you had some problem, if you admit it, people will respect it. And we all understand that people make mistakes. And really we want to see what you do after you slip. That's really, I made this mistake. Okay, I admit it. People appreciate that. He's honest. I'm honest. What are you going to do now? How are you going to follow through? And even if you don't make a mistake, just to be willing to acknowledge your weaknesses, your anarthas, your challenges, that's also a sign of humility. And I know sometimes younger devotees may feel awkward if an older devotee is admitting their mistake, and it makes them feel uncomfortable, or it discourages them. If he's having those problems, what about me? What chance do I have? But actually, we have to see it as a sign of his humility, that he is advancing. Therefore, he's willing to admit this, and it means also that he's dealing with it. He's well aware of it. So we should appreciate it. Whenever Srila Prabhupada saw quality being sacrificed for quantity, he instructed his leaders to boil the milk. That is, to concentrate on solidifying the Krishna consciousness of the devotees already present in the movement. In other words, sometimes leaders would push devotees to work so hard that their sadhana was neglected. And so that's quantity over quality. And the example here is boil the milk. Prabhupada gave this example. Because if you boil milk and you stir it down, you get burfi. So the example was, let's increase the quality of our own devotees. Let's help them be more Krishna conscious rather than expanding in numbers. Quantity, let's take the quantity we already have and boil it, make it sweeter and thicker before we add more milk, and just water it down. Or add more water to the milk. We have quoted a letter to this effect below. It expresses Srila Prabhupada's desire that the training he imparted to his disciples always provide immunity from the material energy. even at the cost of slowing the preaching. So here's a quote. So we're going to end class with this quote. Take a few minutes to read. So I want you leaders especially to become very much absorbed in the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and become yourselves completely convinced and free from all doubt. On this platform you shall be able to carry on the work satisfactorily. But if there is a lack of knowledge, or if there is forgetfulness, everything will be spoiled in time. So especially you must encourage the students to read our books throughout the day as much as possible, and give them all good advice how to understand the books, and inspire them to study the things from every point of view. In this way, by constantly engaging our tongues in the service of the Lord, either by discussing his philosophy or by chanting Hare Krishna, the truth is that Krishna himself will reveal himself to us, and we shall understand how to do everything properly. Now we have got so many students and so many temples, that I am fearful that if we expand too much in this way, that we shall become weakened, and gradually the whole thing will become lost. Just like milk, we may thin it more and more with water for cheating the customer. But in the end, it will cease to be any longer milk. Better to boil the milk now. Better to boil the milk now very vigorously and make it thick and sweet. That is the best process. So let us concentrate on training our devotees very thoroughly in the knowledge of Krishna consciousness from our books, from tapes, by discussing always, and in so many ways instruct them in the right propositions. So this is in response to devotees having difficulties, Prabhupada acknowledging those difficulties, and then recommending that we have to be careful in not neglecting basic practices, um, because if we're not Krishna conscious, certainly we can't give it to others, and if we're not Krishna conscious, we may not even practice it ourselves or be available to others to even try to give it. And so, I don't know if you picked up on one thing Prabhupada said, which is quite interesting. He said that if we do this hearing and chanting, and Krishna will guide us how to serve him. So the process of hearing and chanting is so powerfully purifying that by doing it, we get in touch with Super Soul to the degree that he guides us in that state of a pure desire. Krishna can use us. So it's fundamental to the process of Krishna consciousness. That's the point Prabhupada's making. So he's basically saying don't neglect it. And the idea of boiling the milk and the idea of the water in the milk. The water in the milk was referred to as expansion. We're expanding. So his point is maybe you expand numbers, but the numbers are not becoming Krishna conscious, so that doesn't help. It's like, let's say, money's devalued. So now you have lots and lots more money, but it's not worth anything. So he's saying don't expand your numbers without training properly, because then you'll just have a lot of people who aren't very Krishna conscious. But rather, he was saying at this point in time, it's better that we make sure that all the devotees are being trained properly, are doing sufficient study, properly chanting, and so forth. So that he compared to boiling the milk, so the milk becomes thicker and sweeter. So at one point in our movement, Prabhupada felt like, well, we have enough devotees, we have enough buildings, so let's tighten the foundation upon which we're going to go forward to the next stage. And so that's always a consideration as a society and also as individuals. You know, you have to take your next step when you step with your left foot when your right foot is firmly on the ground, and you step with your right foot when your left foot is firmly on the ground. So Prabhupada said that I think the British Empire expanded so quickly that they lost power in many places. That was his idea. You don't want to increase by minimizing the very essences of what your movement is about. So boil the milk is that idea. Let's make it stronger. Let's regroup, reposition, you know, what did Covey say? Sharpen the saw. You know, take time out, sharpen the saw. Take time out, water your creeper, pull the weeds, make sure everything is good and strong. If we're going to go forward, we don't want to go forward with injured soldiers. So that's the idea. Okay, so I think we're going to end here. We've gone an hour. Thank you for listening. For those of you who want, we've tentatively planned for our Monday class. Our Monday class has two sections, one class before the other. Unfortunately, the first class, excuse me, first class would be at 2:15 a.m. I don't know what time I'm going to sleep in. I don't know what time I will awaken. Second class will be at 3:15 a.m. I also don't know when I'm going to sleep. And last Monday I did awaken at 3:15 and we did give the class. So we'll just have to see, play it by ear. Those of you in Europe and elsewhere, I have no problem listening to it. You're welcome, Ashalata. And please take these instructions to heart and apply them. And you'll be happy and you'll do well in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Go Premanandi.